Welcome to the 2022 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. I'm Rebecca Balcárcel, Associate Professor of English and middle grade author of The Other Half of Happy and Shine on Loose Baileys. And today's session is called Nuestro Mundo, Kids Navigating the Contemporary World. Please read our anti-harassment policy in the chat box. Thanks. And don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's YouTube channel. And if you're a school, classroom, librarian, or educator joining us, please enter our classroom book set giveaway. You can find the link to the entry form in the chat. That would be very cool. Okay, well, let's meet our panelists. I'm speaking today with Monica Brown, Angela Dominguez, Nina Moreno, and Sallie Anne Rodriguez. Please, let's just have each of us tell a little bit about your book. Monica, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Brown, and I am the author of The Turquoise Room, El Cuarto Turquesa, out by Lee and Low and illustrated by the amazing Adriana Garcia. And this is the story of three women and generations of creative women, starting with Esther in Piura in northern Peru, and her daughter is Isabel. And Isabel's daughter, Monica. And yes, this is inspired by my very own family. And it's also an homage to my daughters, Isabel and Juliana. And it's about women with big imaginations that can fly. Thanks.
Wow. Okay. And it's been a joy, by the way, to read these books. I recommend all of them. So, Angela.
So I'm talking about my Stella Diaz series. These are two of them. Stella Diaz is Something to Say and Stella Diaz Dreams Big. The fourth one is Stella Diaz to the Rescue. And it's been this journey of this character that's very much based off of my experiences growing up and then also seeing kids today and what they're going through. And it's a girl that is a immigrant and she feels kind of caught between cultures. She stumbles over her words. She has to take speech classes because she gets her English and her Spanish a little jumbled up, just like me. And it's her finding her voice. So by the time we get to the fourth book, she is finally become a citizen, which is something that she's super pumped about. And she has all these big expectations of what she wants to happen in the new year. But things don't go according to plan. And it might have been inspired by 2020 just a little bit when I was writing
it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, thank you. Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina Moreno. I write both young adult and middle grade. My middle grade series is Maggie Diaz, Join the Club Maggie Diaz, and out soon will be Pack Your Bags Maggie Diaz. And Maggie can definitely relate to things not going according to plan. The series is all about her 7th grade year, and Maggie's got big plans, and a lot of it has to do with independence and maybe having the best 7th grade trip ever. But yeah, so you're going to see amazing illustrations also by Courtney Lovett, and it's really fun to get to follow her plans, her charts, her graphs, and jump into her imagination along with her.
By the way, I love the illustration in all of these books. Yeah, really fun. Sallie Anne, tell us about your book.
Gracias, Rebecca. So my debut novel is Treasure Tracks, and it's an adventure about 12-year-old Fernando, or Finn as he prefers to be called, who goes on a quest for a hidden treasure, hoping that finding the family legacy will help his ailing abuelo.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I'm Rebecca, as I mentioned before. My books are The Other Half of Happy, and then the one that I'll reference today is Shine on Loose Baileys. And she is a bicultural kid who is actually, I'll talk about her in the first question because I think this first question for all of us gives us a chance to really dig deeper into the books. So let's do that. What challenges does your main character face as they navigate their world? And I'll just say about Luz that she is a originally a soccer star, and she thought she was an athlete, and this was her whole identity. And it's what made her parents proud of her and what made her proud of herself. So when she gets injured, she doesn't really know who she is anymore. And she starts to figure that out, discovering coding and robotics. But that injury is something that really rocks her world. And then the second huge challenge she faces is that her father announces a surprise. He has a 13-year-old daughter in Guatemala who they didn't know about before, but who is going to come and live with them. And Luz is going to have to learn to share her room and share her closet and her parents. So that is going to be another big challenge in her life. She'll have an English language learner living with her as well. So she has a lot to learn, which is a good thing, because otherwise we wouldn't have a book, right? So Monica, what challenges does your main character face?
Wow. I think we've all referenced that times can be tough. And I think I wanted to write a book with magic in response to some of the tough realities. So I will say that even though it's not in my book, El Cuarto Turquesa, Esther, the grandmother, my grandmother, who was born in Piura in northern Peru, had a very serious chronic illness, kidney disease, and passed when my mother was only 11. And it's the same disease that I have, but I am the recipient thanks to a beautiful donor of a kidney transplant. It'll be 4 years in December. And so this is an homage to 3 lives, and I hope the lives of my daughters as they grow, about what we do with our creativity and our imagination. So Esther, my grandmother, was very creative, but the only art that I have from her life are these little paintings she made on cutout pieces of cardboard. And also the map she made when she was in school, and it says America del Sur, but it's beautiful. But yet she never studied art. She had very little formal education. And yet she encouraged my mother, Isabel, to study and dream, though she had no education, to fly north and study art. And this is my mother's art, who went on to study art at university and get her BFA and her MFA eventually. And so I think a lot of us have all this beauty. And if there are children listening, you have creativity and dreams and imagination inside. And I guess one of what I wanted to do with the book is share with you that in the littlest creations, like there wasn't enough resources. Apparently, she would paint on either side of these things she cut out of cardboard. And I have about 4 of these precious pieces of art. And so the challenge is, what do you do when you have big dreams, but you may not have big resources, or you may not in this moment be able to fulfill them?
Wow, I'm so happy you shared those with us. Well, Angela, tell us about the challenges that your main character is trying to navigate.
Well, some of it, I mentioned earlier, it's like feeling that caught between cultures, not feeling like you're quite American enough, or not feeling you're quite Latino enough or Mexican enough. In Stella's case, feeling embarrassed that she doesn't speak more Spanish, which is something that I definitely grew up feeling. And then it's also the real life personal connections of making friends. And once you have the confidence to do that, how do you express your, passions and the things that you care about to a larger audience? So she loves the oceans. She loves the environment. She wants to help protect them. And she wants to spread this idea further beyond just her little group. And that's the challenges that come with doing that. There's also the challenges of having a father who's not particularly that great of a father, and learning to accept that. And I think outside of that, it's also feeling torn for liking more than one thing, loving art, but also loving the environment and the oceans, and letting kids know that it's totally fine to have multiple interests. It's really great because you're still figuring out who you are. So I think those are the biggest challenges that Stella has to deal with.
And the great thing is the more challenges they have, the more inspiring these characters are. Nina, tell us about your characters' challenges.
As I mentioned, the Maggie Diaz series, it takes place over 7th grade. So the first book is the first half of the year. The second is the second half. And so in the first half, you see Maggie taking on a very awkward, chaotic, illuminating 7th grade year, which I think a lot of us can relate to. 7th grade being kind of terrible, and we're trying to figure out who we are. We're trying to figure out who our friends are, where we fit in. So Maggie sees her best friends sort of excelling at stuff. They're in clubs and they seem to have very defined roles. They have defined places to sit. And that's a huge deal. So Maggie's like, I'm going to join every club to figure out who I am. So she, she has a list and she has a plan, and it's not easy because she also lives in a multi-generational home. So she has abuela in her room and she has a baby brother, and it's chaos, and that can make it feel even harder to figure out who you are, because you're like, who is school Maggie? Who is home Maggie? So by the end of that book, she's figured some stuff out. But by the time book 2 starts, she's going into it real confident. But she's sort of trying to coordinate all her friends' lives a little bit. Like, oh, we're going on the 7th grade trip. You're going to be this. You're going to do this. And you realize that you can't really decide for other people, and there's a new friend, and how can you be a trio? Because I dealt with that a lot in middle school. Like when you had 2 best friends, like, can you have 2 best friends? Or and there's also crushes, and so it's a lot to navigate. It's tough. It's 7th grade, but Maggie's trying her best.
And she does this with a lot of humor, by the way. I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. So Sallie Anne, what's your character dealing with?
So Finn, the protagonist of Treasure Tracks, he's dealing with some internal and some external challenges. There's some tension going on with his family between his dad and his abuelo. So he's trying to navigate around that. And then externally, there's a lot of conflict going on too, as he's trying to find this missing treasure. So he's dealing with hurricanes. He's dealing with his beloved abuelo's life, which is hanging on a thread at some point in the novel, which is really pushing him on his quest to try to succeed and find this treasure, which he almost equates towards saving abuelo's life. And then there's predators. There's even a shark that's actually on the cover of my novel, which is really cool that it made the cover. And there's also some modern day pirates, which Finn thinks are going after his loot and trying to stop him from achieving his goals. So there's quite a bit going on.
There really is. Yes. Wow. Well, of course, we're all Latinx authors, and our characters are dealing with their heritage in different ways. How easy or maybe complicated is your main character's relationship to heritage or to family? Let's start with Monica.
Wow, I love that question, because I think most of us who write for children and who write about our lives and want to share the beauty and complexity of and contributions of the people of the Americas in our culture, family is very important in all the good ways and some challenging ways too. So what's so interesting to me and meaningful is that I see this book as almost part of a longer journey as a writer. I've been writing for 15 years, and I think I believe my first biographical book that was super meaningful to me and others was Marisol McDonald, Doesn't Match, No Combina, illustrated by Sarah Palacios. And that had challenges. It's very biographical, and it was a girl who was called Mismatched, and because of her name, and that she had olive skin and red hair. And then the second facet of this journey in writing about my family, but through fiction, expressing stories, was the Lola Levine series, which I will say at an earlier point in her career journey was illustrated by the amazing Angela Dominguez, who's here. And so Lola, who was a fierce, and this highlighted other aspects of my identity and my own family, and was inspired by my two daughters, Isabella, who is a ballerina, and Juliana, who really was the model for Lola Levine, the fierce soccer player who gets called mean Lola Levine. So I actually feel that a lot of the challenges of being bicultural, a child of two continents, bilingual, multiracial, I explored in these early books with humor and with love. And I think that this last book that I've written, that is directly inspired by my family, to the point where there's a character that's Monica, and my children, Isabella and Juliana, are named, and there's even a picture of us at the back of the book, is more focusing on the joy and the meaning of family in terms of what we carry in our hearts from the family that are no longer with us. And for me, that's so powerful. This book represents the joy of family and what we carry in our hearts from those who are no longer with us, and what we pass on. And I know for my children, and for all children, I wanted to pass along a type of nurturing of creativity and joy and imagination. I wanted my daughters to imagine their lives, not just let others place expectations on them. And that's what my mother, Isabel, allowed me to do. And that's what I think I'm celebrating in this book.
Mhm. That is really beautiful. Angela, what about your book and your character dealing with her heritage or family?
Well, this is a little tangent. I will say I absolutely loved working on Lola Levine, and that was a huge inspiration. Later on, when I started doing Stella and I realized it wasn't going to work as a picture book, I started thinking maybe I could do it like Lola. So that was really special to work on. I think for Stella and her family, that's her rock. That's who she's super close to. Her mother is someone that she can confide with and someone that always encourages her and pushes her. Her brother is a typical older brother, but he's also very sweet, and he steps in for like an absent father. And he's the one that can be, when she needs him, be the one that offers her advice. Her extended family is all back in Mexico, but she loves seeing them for the holidays. But it's a little hard, and I know that a few of my friends have felt this way too. Like when you have family that you don't see very often, and then they come and visit, and they feel almost like strangers, but you still love them. So it's the idea of exploring that very complicated relationship that we can have with extended family as well. And I think she craves learning more about her culture and experiencing it through food or traditions. She's obsessed with New Year's because that was the one time that we would go crazy. Well, not crazy is a strong word, but we would get really excited about like eating the 12 grapes and having to sweep the door to get all the bad spirits out and taking our luggage back and forth. And all of that has really inspired the character of Stella.
I am so relating to all of this with my own bicultural situation too. And I know a lot of our listeners are also. Well, Nina, what about your character?
Yeah, I definitely, I've written complicated relationships when it comes to culture and heritage. My first book, my YA, Don't Date Rosa Santos, she's, a senior student who is trying to have a conversation with her abuela about Cuba, and Cuba feels like this heirloom that she can't touch. And, so it's this push and pull between who am I, where am I going, especially when you're making these huge decisions your senior year. But with Maggie, Maggie lives in Miami, which can be a bit of a bubble for us Cuban Americans. You don't feel that struggle with culture because it's everywhere. It's embedded into everything. So I wanted to explore through Maggie, because this is a very funny series, and I wanted to explore. That's my abuelo's grandfather clock, by the way, that I just inherited. So if you hear that, but I wanted to explore all the ways like that it shapes your sort of coming of age, awkward middle school experience. I grew up loving shows like Lizzie McGuire and like Disney afternoon shows. And I saw these kids who were kind of like me, but I didn't see my family. I didn't see the like little ways in which our culture like gets into everything. I didn't see anybody who lived with their abuela, you know, and there were my abuelos not speaking English to, you know, my friends, or we're roasting a pig in the front yard and everybody's looking at you, and like it can feel really embarrassing. And then you kind of zoom out when you get older and you're like, wow, I'm really proud of the way I grew up and it was funny and silly. Or you get older and you meet, you know, other kids of immigrants and you're like, oh wow, like I was not allowed to sleep over at anyone's house. You weren't either, you know? So
No.
finding those commonalities with others, I think it's so joyous and there's so much power in humor. So I really wanted to explore the way that, you know, it's not so much the struggle, but it's just the way it gets into everything and it can make life, you know, even more beautiful and more colorful.
I love that. Yes, exactly. Sallie Anne.
Yeah, so in Treasure Tracks, it's actually an intergenerational story. So the family dynamics are front and center throughout the book. And I think I mentioned earlier, there's some tension between Finn and his dad, and then his abuelo, who's like his go-to adventurer that he just like, you know, basically his beloved abuelo. He's all about abuelos. So he's trying to overcome some of those dynamics. And he's also really trying to, I guess part of the character arc is him really trying to understand and appreciate some of the Spanish Caribbean culture, because he's half Cuban, he's half Puerto Rican. And so really the treasure comes from Cuba. So it's really cool that at the end of the story, he's like, wow, I've got this really amazing heritage. I think the abuelo describes it as frijoles con habichuela, a mix of the Spanish Caribbean. So it's, you know, it's a lot of fun along the way for him to really discover these little nuggets, these little treasures about himself, and really just trying to bridge the family together and come together as a team to work together and really discover this treasure. So it's really 3 generations of the Roman family that are represented here, because the treasure traces back to his great grandfather, who was a train engineer back in Cuba and then in the Florida Keys. So really it's 100% family here, and just navigating those waters, if you will.
Yeah, I think my character would relate to all of your characters. Like it'd be fun to have them all in a room or something. But that treasure of family, even as it's also complicated, is hard for my character to learn. Luz is half Guatemalan, and so she's grown up very American. Her Spanish is pretty sketchy. So when this half sister joins the family, who is fluent in Espanol, you know, it's surprising to her to hear Spanish conversations happening in the house. I mean, sure, she played soccer, football, but her sister's showing her things like the Mayan zodiac, or like these giant kites that they fly in a particular village, Sumpango, for the Day of the Dead. And so she realizes that she doesn't have the treasure, you know, like she has kind of missed it. She's been busy being an assimilated kid, and that's fine, except that look here, you know, there's all of this other that her sister is bringing and enriching the family. The same with the like English language learners at school. She's been pretty much dismissing them, like not paying attention. But now that her sister is one of them, she's realizing, oh, they are real people. I know that sounds like she should already know that, but she hasn't quite realize that they have very interesting stories, and just because they don't speak English doesn't mean she can't be friends with them. Like they're friend material too. So she's really learning to appreciate her heritage in a new way, and so she's finding the treasure that you're talking about. Okay, so let's see. Did you stumble on some fun facts or topics when you were researching your book? I'm always curious about this aspect of the book process. Monica, we'll let you start us.
Well, this was so fun because on the one hand, the book was an occasion to talk to my tias and ask more questions about my mother's childhood. But we were so close. I had so many stories of hers. I did the research growing up because in the sense that I did go back and forth to Peru. I have been on Lake Titicaca and on the floating islands of the Uros and Machu Picchu. And so that part was drawing from experiential knowledge. But I have a fun fact for the scientists and those that love the animal world. I found out a lot about the blue morpho butterfly. Butterflies are in all my books. I love butterflies. There's a scene of Anna flying on a butterfly's back in Waiting for the Biblioburo. And they're even in the end papers here. The blue morpho butterflies, which are, in Mexico, Central America, and South America, are gorgeous. And of course, you might note from all of Adriana's brilliant illustrations, this is about the color blue and turquoise. So I thought the blue morpho butterflies were a perfect metaphor and just symbol for the color turquoise and blue, but also flight and joy and transformation, because we know that a butterfly's life is just not with wings, but starts, as caterpillars, hungry caterpillars. So that was really fun. And the color, because I'm the daughter of an artist, colors are important to me. And the blue morpho butterflies, the blue iridescence, and iridescence just means the way light changes color of the wings, are so fascinating and produce such a bright color of blue that bioengineers and scientists have studied these butterflies to understand what they can tell us about light and reflection. And so I thought that was a cool new area of research. And I love the way Adriana depicted the blue morpho butterflies in the book.
Ooh, definitely. Oh, Angela, let's go to you.
So Stella's in the first book, Stella Diaz has something to say. She is doing an animal project and she chooses sea creatures because she just loves the oceans. And they became ways of showing or ways of symbolizing how she was feeling in the book. So like if she was really nervous and embarrassed herself, she wanted to get away as quick as an octopus, because they are amazing escape artists. They can escape through a hole an inch wide, which is really cool. And you can actually see that online, like on YouTube. And I've found a lot of other facts because that's something that I've continued throughout all the books. Like Jacques Cousteau and his friends invented the Aqualung, which allows people to scuba dive, which is amazing because he not only changed the way that we could see the oceans just on our TV, but the way that we got to interact with them as well. I think my other favorite fact is the blobfish, which looks really funny and gooey. It only looks like that in the water because it's at a level that it has so much pressure in the air that it makes it look like it's just a giant blob. But if you take it to the surface, it looks like a normal fish. So it's really fascinating, all the things you can find about the oceans. And I've definitely spent a lot of time looking for it.
Wow. Oh, we can learn a lot reading these books. Okay, Nina.
For Pack Your Bags, Maggie Diaz, it was actually a lot of fun research because when we came up with we were like, okay, we're going to write another one. What should we do? Me and my editor were going back and forth because she's also from South Florida. So we were like, okay, middle school angst, like, what do you think? What do you think? We stumbled on field trip, like, because Florida, like, if you're a Florida kid going through Florida school, you can have some funny field trips, whether it's the Everglades or airboats or Jungle Island or, whatever. So we were like, we have to do a field trip book, right? So I was like, okay, what city in Florida? Because it's a big deal for Maggie. This is her first overnight trip away from her parents, who she will not let be chaperones on this trip. And so she's like, she wants to go somewhere cool. And so we stumbled upon St. Augustine. And I love the city of St. Augustine in Florida because it's so historical. You can go on all these trolley tours. But what was really, really fun for me was all the ghost tours, because Maggie's like, I want to go on a ghost tour. And our abuela is like, you are not going on a ghost tour. So it was fun because I got to do all these YouTube, like, because I have to get up there soon, but I got to go on all these ghost tours and like follow everybody around and be, and so for me that was really fun because I like spooky, it's spooky season, and so for me and Maggie, that was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Okay, Sallie Anne.
Little side note, I just want to say I have done one of those St. Augustine ghost tours, and they're
Yes.
awesome. So I even found it here in Florida. Check it out. But anyway, for Treasure Tracks, the whole premise of the novel is really rooted in history and research that I conducted, because there was a hurricane in 1935. It was called the Labor Day Hurricane, and it actually swept through the Keys. And it also swept away a railroad that we used to have, Flagler's Railroad. The overseas railroad used to connect Miami to the, basically Key West, all the way to Miami, to the mainland, all the way up to New York. It ran all across the eastern border. So this hurricane swept some of the rail cars out to sea. So really the whole premise of Treasure Tracks is, what if there was treasure on board this train? So it was all based on this research that I conducted. I read this book called Last Train to Paradise by Les Standiford. And that's really where all of the ideas came to fruition for this novel. And then also I stumbled upon some other fun facts. I had a little spooky one there, which is there's this reef. It's called Carysfort Reef, and it has a lighthouse, and it's got a haunted history, I guess, with the lighthouse keeper. So it was really interesting. And I also learned, which I knew that there were a lot of shipwrecks, and I'm a diver myself. So I've done a lot of diving, and I've done some shipwreck divings, which are fascinating. But can you believe there's over 1,000 documented shipwrecks in the waters of the Florida Keys? I never knew it was this much. And most of them, believe it or not, have been caused by hurricanes. So
Wow.
that is the premise of Treasure Tracks.
Oh, that is a lot of shipwrecks. Oh my
It
goodness.
sure is.
And that you've dived and seen some is so exciting. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of them are actually in shallow waters, so they're accessible.
I can see it. Well, I also had fun researching my book. In Shine on Loose Lilies, I had to learn a little bit about coding because she does some computer coding. And I remembered my, 1980s basic coding, but I also needed to learn something modern. So I learned about Scratch. And on my website, you can actually see the game that Loose codes and play it, a link to the Scratch code. And so Scratch is so awesome. And I really just discovered it because of writing this book. And then the other aspect is robots. And so I watched hours of Lego Mindstorm robot footage to see what classrooms were doing with these robots and what a robotics club would look like, so that I could make that realistic for the book. So I had enormous fun with that. It sounds like research was pretty great for all of us. Okay, well, now we have some questions from kids. So we'll go to the first one, Pilar, and this is a video question.
Hi, my name is Pilar, and I want to ask you a question. What has been your favorite book you read?
Oh, the favorite book you've read. Oh, okay. Well, let's start with Monica.
Wow. Well, I was thinking about that, and I had so many favorite books, but one was like a collection of ghost stories, and I think we see a theme. And what I like about ghost stories and fantasy stories and stories that are magically real, like some of the ones I try to write, is the fact that, in our everyday lives, we have certain types of routines and boundaries and have to get up and do this and do that. And we also have countries and nations and borders, but in our minds, all we have is what we have is limitless. So I really like the idea of this world of fantasy where we can travel and escape and not be limited at all. And when it comes to love and imagination, there are no borders, no boundaries between what is fantastic and what is everyday and real. They can blend together.
Angela, what about you?
There's just so many books that I absolutely love. I think I have to say, though, like the books that made me really excited about storytelling and want to be like an author and illustrator when I was young was probably The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. When I read that out loud, I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever read in my life. I felt like I found the secret book and I had to tell everyone about it. and I absolutely loved all the illustrations and trying to find in like all the little jokes within it. So I think that's the power of an amazing book. It inspires you to want to make your own work too, and that's the reason I love making books.
Yeah, and there the illustrations made such a big difference, like a puzzle to solve. Okay, Nina, what about you?
I'm gonna fully embrace the spooky, like Monica said. I even mentioned that in like my first book. Latinos, like, we're pretty goth. Like we like our spooky, So I recently have been really inspired by other writers who've been able to navigate both young adult and middle grade. And I think some that are doing some amazing work in both have been Taylor K Mejia. She has the We Set the Dark on Fire duology in YA, but she also does the Paola Santiago series, which is an amazing middle grade trilogy that's like super spooky, super fun. La Llorona, like it's amazing. And Lakin Zia Kemp, she does beautiful YA contemporary it's some of my favorite books. And she has one coming up, Omega Morales and the Legend of La Chuza, I think, and that's coming out soon. And also La Reina, Zoraida Cordova, like she does the Brooklyn Bruja series and Incendiary series in YA, but she also just came out with Valentina Salazar is Not a Monster Hunter. And like, those are just some of the most fun middle grade books happening right now. And I just love that they're written by other Latinas. I love that they're spooky, and they're just, I think they have the most beautiful, like bright, colorful covers. And it's just, I love seeing them on people's shelves. So I'm really excited about those books.
Yeah, the covers alone are amazing right now. Yeah. Sallie Anne.
So for me, I'm going to go back to when I was a middle-aged reader. I grew up in the islands of Puerto Rico, and I knew that there was this great big world outside of my island, but I hadn't seen it. So for me, it was really all about taking a journey and a fantastical adventure through books. And I was obsessed with the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I wanted to join Lucy and, save my kingdom and go to these fantastical worlds. And of course, Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, because I'm obsessed with the sea and the ocean. So I grew up with those stories, and I've read them as an adult as well, and I enjoy them just as much.
Yeah. Oh, I love Narnia too. And I'm going to answer the same way with The Bridge to Terabithia. I thought this book was like the perfect book when I read it. So it inspired me as a kid and also as an author. Later, I reread it. And then I love poetry. So I want to do a shout out to Mary Oliver. This is her like new and selected poetry. And even if you're young, you'll still be able to read her work. She's pretty accessible. And I find when my well runs dry creatively that going back to poetry just really just nourishes my soul. So I have to mention that. Okay, well, let's hear from another kiddo with a question.
At what age did you begin to like writing?
Oh, at what age? For me, I was 12 years old, and I was assigned a short story at school, and I was just transported with the experience of like seeing a movie in my head and writing a story. So maybe I enjoyed writing before that, but I don't remember loving it until that moment when I was 12. So that's my answer. What about Monica?
It's actually a tough question in the sense that I don't know if enjoyment is always the word, but I feel like as a kid, I had so many things bubbling up in my head that if I didn't get some of them out, I'd be in big trouble. That is still true now. So I actually think, first of all, I think, guess what? Guess what you need to do to be a writer? Write. And so I think I was a writer when I started writing in my diary, and I did. And I started writing letters, and I just was an oral storyteller, told stories, made up stories with my friends. And so I think I enjoyed it. It was necessary. And now I get to call it a part of my work.
Perfect. Yeah. Angela, what about you?
Well, from a very early age, I loved drawing and I really got into making my own books with like words and pictures. And then as I was in school, I have very mild dyslexia, and I would kind of, even though I speak English better than I speak Spanish, I would just make little grammar mistakes. Like I'd put the sentences in the structure that you would do in Spanish, because my brain was just a little jumbled up like that. So I did well. I did really well in school, but I was always really nervous about showing creative writing. But it wasn't until high school that I was taking like an English composition class that my teacher told me that she thought I was a great writer. And I had always loved it, but I was really shy about it. And that stuck with me. So it's amazing the difference that our teachers can do for us growing up, and really encourage us to want to be writers, to express ourselves with stories. And you can be a storyteller in so many different ways, whether with words or pictures.
Yes. Oh, yay, teachers. Nina, what about you?
Like everyone else, I loved writing when I was younger. I did little stories, and my mom would let me print them out, and it was just the best thing ever. But honestly, like, I wasn't always a student that got great grades. So sometimes in school, like, I felt like my love of writing went away when, like, I was doing essays and doing things that I wasn't really enjoying. And I was like, maybe I don't like writing. So I sort of like shelved it. But it wasn't until later when I started reading again and reading YA that I loved, or reading, whatever I wanted to read, whether it was comic books, graphic novels, whatever was like feeding, my creativity and making me feel excited about stories. And then I discovered fan fiction, and I started writing about those stories or those shows I was watching or those movies. And then it was like, eureka, and it was like, I do love writing. So I think remembering that sometimes you don't always have to love writing. Just because you're struggling, maybe you're not loving English this year or whatever it is, it doesn't mean you're not a writer. It doesn't mean you're never going to find another story idea. Just, it's always going to be there for you.
Yeah, exactly. Sallie Anne.
Yeah, so for me, kind of like Monica, I definitely kept a journal when I was in grade school. And I think I always loved writing. I always loved the challenge of filling a blank page, but I like the creative aspect of it. I think Nina mentioned this well. When you have to write a more structured essay, I felt I couldn't let loose. So I really just wanted to tell my own stories and just go with the flow. I still do. So I just, it was really all about the creative process of writing. So I think it's important to balance that. And I tell my kids as well, sometimes they feel so structured. I'm like, go with it, go wherever the inspiration takes you, be authentic, be real, have fun. And really, that's the biggest advice I tell my own kids: have fun, because it's really going to come across on the page. If you're unbridled and you've got that enthusiasm, it's going to pour into the page.
It will, exactly. And we have one last question. And this is from Henry. How do you get your ideas for your books? Oh, wow. Okay, so in about 1 or 2 sentences each, how do you get your ideas? Monica, how do you get your ideas?
From the whole wide world, really. From my life, from my children, from other children, from questions students ask me, and from this magic place that arrives when I work hard enough, it'll come to me. Everyone talks, many people talk about a magic muse that comes, but you have to be sitting in front of your computer when she stops by. So I'm smiling because I'm thinking of things we all have in common, including a love of the ocean. So I'm doing a chapter book series called The Fantastical Tales of Mari A. Fish. And she's a secret mermaid spy sent above water to find out why humans are polluting the ocean. And it's an endless source, because now I have undersea to inspire me. So it's just fun.
So your ideas come from everywhere. Okay.
Everywhere.
Angela, what about you?
A lot of them are experiences. Some of them are things that I get curious about and I start researching, and that makes me think about other ideas. So usually you need the grain of something small to inspire you to come up with something big. And then I would say finally drawings, since I am an illustrator too, And that's a big tip I like to share with kids, like draw characters, see what comes up. Maybe that's the way that you unlock your idea for your next story.
Oh yeah, that's such good advice. Nina, what would you say?
I think an idea definitely starts with a spark, whether it's a song, a movie, a show, another book. But I don't want to over romanticize the spark because the story won't fall into place right after that. It takes a lot of work, a lot of rewriting, a lot of editing. But I think that process, the chasing of that idea is that's the fun, you know?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Sallie Anne, what would you say?
I really draw inspiration from the entire world as well, just everything around me, and a lot of nonfiction. As I mentioned, what inspired Treasure Tracks being this real life event with the hurricane. And there's so many nuggets that I included in the book that were based on real inspiration. The shark on my cover, I actually had a real life encounter with my youngest son in a reef. So he made it to the story and he made it to the cover. So, and I remember even driving through the Keys because I wrote most of the novel in the Keys, and I remember driving and seeing like a crocodile crossing. Oh, I need to put that into the book. So really, I just drew from everything around me.
I have to say it's similar for me. Anything could become inspiration. If you're living a life that is kind of open, receptive to wonder, to beauty, you'll be surprised that the whole world is there for your imagination to latch onto. I know when I'm getting serious though about planning a book, I really think about character, and I think about what I've learned from this life and what my character might be able to learn over the course of a book. And if I can offer some sort of insight into how to live more happily, or to have more love in my life, or to be healthier as a person, I want to put that. I want my character to have that same experience and learn that same thing. So I do introspect a lot, and so my interior landscape and my exterior landscape both can inspire the story and create the book. Yeah. Well, this has been such a joy. Yes, did you enjoy it, everybody?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, panelists and viewers. Thank you for attending our panel. This has been Nuestro Mundo, Kids Navigating the Contemporary World at the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. Hasta pronto.
Gracias. Bye.
Bye-bye.